Hey guys, my name is William Owens and I want to thank you so much for joining me for my second video on my YouTube channel. Last week we answered the question, can we beat Pokemon FireRed with a team of only Caterpie and Weedle? While this was obviously a very difficult challenge, there wasn't a whole lot of strategy involved. But for this challenge we're going in the opposite direction. We're going to see whether or not you can beat Pokemon FireRed with a team half the level of our opponents. This means that every trainer battle is going to be difficult. And for our final rival battle against his level 63 Blastoise, we're going to be coming in with Pokemon level 31 or lower. Here are the rules. Every one of my Pokemon must begin the battle at half the level or less of that of my opponent's top Pokemon. So for example, if my opponent's top Pokemon is level 20, all my Pokemon have to begin the battle at level 10 or less. If any of my Pokemon start the battle higher than half the level of the opponent's top Pokemon, then I'm not allowed to use it, and this includes during the Elite Four, so I'm going to have to make sure that I don't unintentionally overlevel my Pokemon, so I can have a full team against my opponents. Because of the large level disparity between me and my opponents, my Pokemon are likely going to level up 1 or 2 times every single battle, so they can still be used for the remainder of the fight. Held items such as berries will be allowed for this challenge, but things like X items, potions, or revives will not be allowed, because I think it just makes the game way too easy. As always, there will be no cheats or exploits. And with all that being said and done, let's see whether or not you can beat Pokemon FireRed with a team half the level of your opponents. From the very beginning I chose Charmander to be my starter, giving my rival a Squirtle, which is arguably the best Kanto starter, and this makes this challenge just a little bit more difficult. There is a required rival battle at the beginning of the game, but this will be the only battle in which my Pokemon are even close to the level of that of my opponents. I hurried through most of the early game, and then as soon as I was given Pokeballs by Professor Oak, I made my way over to Route 22 to catch a very important Pokemon for the beginning of this game, Mankey. Mankey is the only fighting type Pokemon you can acquire this early in the game, so it's going to be absolutely crucial to have against the upcoming Brock battle. After catching a pair of Mankeys, I then made my way into the Viridian Forest to catch another Pokemon that I thought would be useful for this run. Although Weedle is weak to Rock-type moves, it knows Poison Sting, a move which has a 30% chance of poisoning the target on any given turn. I made sure to get my Mankeys up to level 6, because at that level they learn the move Low Kick, a fighting-type move that does more damage to heavier opponents. There's only one required trainer battle in the Viridian Forest, and that's against a Bug Catcher who has a level 9 Weedle. This means I can only use Pokemon level 4 or lower. Thankfully though, it was an incredibly easy battle. I beat it using only one Pidgey, mostly because of how bad his move choice was. The next required battle is against Brock, the Rock-type gym leader. His highest level Pokemon is a level 14 Onix, meaning I have to go in with a team level 7 or lower. I'm honestly not very worried about this battle. Brock is basically just used to give beginning players an idea of what battling is going to be like. So to make things a little bit more difficult, and to preserve my Pokemon for the next part of the run, I'm going in with a team at level 6. But this is the only gym leader in which I'm going to be able to get away with doing that. I opened with one of my Mankeys, hoping to do decent damage with Low Kick. Not only did I do very little damage, I got taken out in 2 tackles. This battle may actually be more difficult than I expected. Thankfully though, when I sent out my second Mankey, Geodude just decided to start spamming Defense Curl, so I was able to slowly whittle it down. Instead of just keeping Mankey out, I decided to switch for Pidgey, hoping to lower Onix's accuracy. But unfortunately he was faster than me, and his Rock Tomb hit, knocking me out in a single attack. I was actually starting to get a little bit nervous at this point, so I switched to Weedle, just praying that I'd be able to get off a Poison Sting. His Rock Tomb missed due to its low accuracy, and I managed to get the poison on the very first attempt. From there it basically just became a waiting game. I had to watch as he started picking off my Pokemon one by one. Rock Tomb is a very inaccurate move, so I was shocked that it was able to hit so many times in a row. Last up is Mankey, and thankfully he finally missed his Rock Tomb. And I got off a fairly powerful Low Kick, dropping it to just low enough health that poison eventually took it out. I gotta say, I really did not think Brock would be that difficult. I thought he may take out 1 or 2 of my Pokemon, not 5. But after that I got my running shoes and I made my way onto the next route. Thankfully there's not a lot of required trainers here. I ran into kind of a unique problem. Bug Catchers actually ended up being pretty difficult during this run. They usually have pretty large teams, so it takes forever to beat them. But eventually I made it through and got to the tall grass to catch a few different Pokemon that are going to be absolutely crucial for this run, including the male Nidoran who can evolve into Nidoking, as well as a few Jigglypuffs, mostly because they know the move Sing, which instantly puts the opponent's Pokemon to sleep. I made my way into Mount Moon, and normally I never catch any Pokemon in here, but for this run I'm going to be catching the Pokemon Paris, mostly because it's part grass type, which is going to be so helpful for the rival and for Misty. I made sure to grab the Moonstone because that's going to be very important for this part of the game. I also caught a few Clefairies, mostly because they know the move Encore. Thankfully there's only 2 required trainer battles in Mount Moon, but I actually struggled with a Team Rocket grunt battle, because his Rattata knows the move Hyper Fang, which is just way too strong of a move for this early in the game. After I finally beat that battle, I made sure to grab the second Moonstone, but just before I exited the cave, I remembered I forgot to catch one of the most important Pokemon for the early stages of this run, so I ran all the way back to Viridian Forest to catch a pair of Pikachus. I then went all the way back through Mount Moon and got to Cerulean City. There's only one patch of grass that's accessible at this point, but thankfully you can catch Ekans, a poison-type Pokemon that may have the ability Intimidate, which cuts the opponent's attack by 1 stage. Let's take a look at Blue's team. His strongest Pokemon, Squirtle, is level 18, meaning my team can only be level 9 or lower. Here's the team. I have a pair of Pikachus which are going to be very useful in dealing with his two strongest Pokemon, Pidgeotto and Squirtle, but things went terribly from the very start. His Pidgeotto immediately one-shot my first Pikachu with its quick attack, and then was able to take out my second Pikachu in just 2 hits. I then sent out Mankey hoping for great luck, but it's obvious I'm just going to need a better strategy. I sent out Ekans to poison the Pidgeotto, and then immediately switched to Jigglypuff, hoping that since they're different genders, Jigglypuff's cute charm ability would be able to infatuate the other Pokemon. And it worked beautifully. Pidgeotto kept being immobilized by love, and I just kept buffing my defenses while watching the poison slowly take it down. Since that worked so well, I decided to do a similar strategy against the Rattata. But instead of poisoning it, I used the move Sing to put it to sleep. That way I could just use my attack to slowly whittle it down. It took a while, but eventually it fainted, but then he sent out his very powerful Squirtle, a Pokemon that could almost certainly take out my entire team with one water gun. I sent out Pikachu because it knows Thunder Wave, which immediately paralyzes the target, and after that the battle was very easy. I just kept using Thunder Shock, which is super effective against Water-type Pokemon. Thankfully his Abra only knows the move Teleport, which does nothing in trainer battles. This took a number of attempts, but eventually I was able to win, and it allowed us to advance to the next part of the challenge. I honestly wasn't much to cover on Mega Bridge. Thankfully early in the round I made sure to catch a bunch of different Pokemon, that way I could use them for these in-between battles. A couple battles came fairly close, but I was never in any real danger. Next up is Misty, the Water-type gym leader. Her strongest Pokemon is a level 21 Starmie, meaning my Pokemon have to be level 10 at the start of this battle. The team isn't very different than that of the last rival battle, but I decided to use one of the Moonstones that I collected in Mount Moon to evolve one of my Clefairies into a Clefable. The battle actually started off very well. My Ekans was able to survive a single Water Pulse from Staryu, and was able to inflict poison damage on the first attack. For some reason the AI almost always makes Staryu use Harden against my Clefairy for some reason, so I used Encore so it could only use Harden. Then I sent out Pikachu to use a single Thunder Shock, and that, along with poison, was enough to cause Staryu to faint, and it only was able to take out one of my Pokemon. I then sent out Paris to use Stun Spore to paralyze Starmie. I don't know how, but I had absolutely amazing paralysis luck. So Starmie was unable to attack for multiple turns, plus Bullet Seed was doing passable damage, since it's super effective against Water-type Pokemon. I then sent out Clefable to use Encore to make sure that Starmie could only use its weakest move, Rapid Spin. This allowed me to get a few hits in before eventually being taken out. From there it was basically just a waiting game, just like the last gym battle. Starmie was able to one-shot both Ekans and Clefable with a Water Pulse. But thankfully Pikachu had the speed advantage, and one Thunder Shock was enough to win us our second gym badge. I knew Misty was going to be very difficult, but I honestly didn't think she'd be that hard. After that I made my way up to Bill's house to get the ticket for the SSN, making sure to avoid every trainer battle that I could. Normally this Team Rocket Grunt battle is one of the easiest in the game, but because I didn't have many Pokemon who were low enough of a level, this actually proved to be a fairly difficult battle that took me a few different attempts. But eventually I won and made my way to the SSN outside of Vermilion City. There's only one required trainer battle in here, and that's against our rival Blue. Here's his team. He evolved 3 of his Pokemon from the last battle, so I knew this was going to be a very hard challenge, and it proved to be incredibly difficult. I figured that I would struggle with his Wartortle or his newly evolved Kadabra, but the thing that absolutely killed my first few runs was his Raticate. I've played FireRed probably 50 times over the years, and I've never struggled with this thing, but his Hyper Fang is way too powerful, plus it can use Quick Attack, which always hits first. I need to rethink my strategy. Since all of Blue's Pokemon are male, I decided to teach the move Attract to my Beedrill, and this proved to be an absolutely crucial move for the entirety of this run. I opened the battle with Ekans, mostly because of its Intimidate ability, which lowers the opponent's attack power by 1 stage. This proved to be a very good decision because I was able to withstand a couple hits, plus I was able to get the poison off against Pidgeotto. Just like the last rival battle, I immediately switched to Clefairy because of its cute charm ability. It fell in love immediately, and because it was sustaining poison damage on every turn, Pidgeotto fainted before it could take out any of my Pokemon. Next up is the Pokemon that ruined all of my previous attempts, Raticate. Thankfully though, Pikachu's static ability paralyzed it after it used a physical attack move. I then sent out Beedrill to use Attract, and it went absolutely beautifully. Move after move, it just wasn't able to attack me, so I slowly whittled it down until eventually I knocked it out. Man, I really wish I would have thought of this strategy before, because this could have saved me hours of attempts. I then sent out Butterfree, mostly because it can use the move String Shot, which lowers the opponent's speed by 1 stage. I made sure it was confused, and then I immediately switched to Beedrill to do the same kind of strategy I used against the Raticate. Thankfully, because of String Shot, Kadabra is now slower than my entire team, and the combination of Attract and Confusion worked perfectly. I'm definitely going to be using this strategy for the rest of the run. Last up is the strongest Pokemon, Wartortle. I started off with Ekans just to lower its attack stat because of the Intimidate ability, and then I switched over to Beedrill just hoping to do the same Attract strategy that's worked so well. He got off a Water Gun, which did take half of my health, so at this point I was getting a little bit worried, but luckily I was eventually able to poison it and get the Attract off. From there, just like his other Pokemon, it was very easy. Believe it or not, this was actually the first run I was able to make it past Eradicate. That was the only thing holding me up for multiple hours. Next up is Surge, the Electric-type gym leader. While this isn't a required battle at this point, I figured I may as well give it a try since I can't level my Pokemon any higher anyway. Things were honestly going fairly well until I got to his Raichu, but then I realized he can one-shot my entire team with Shockwave. Instead of just advancing to Rock Tunnel and going on to the next gym, I decided to go back to Mount Moon to catch a Pokemon which, honestly, I didn't even think I'd be using during this challenge, but it proved to be absolutely crucial, and that's Geodude, a Pokemon that's part Ground-type, so it is completely immune to Electric-type moves. On the way back to Vermilion City, I picked up another Pokemon that I rarely use, and that's Mr. Mime. The only way you can acquire it is via trade, so I decided to pick it up, mostly because it has very good special attack and special defense. I went back to Vermilion City and decided to reattempt the gym battle. This is the team I'm working with. I don't know if I'm going to be able to win at this point, but I think that because of my newly acquired Geodude, I should at least have a shot. Surge's team, specifically Voltorb and his Pikachu, are notoriously weak, so really the only thing I have to worry about is his very powerful Raichu. I gave the TM Dig to my Clefable because ground-type moves are super effective against electric-type Pokemon. It actually did really good damage despite the big level disparity, and Surge thankfully wasted his Super Potion on the Voltorb. Clefable unfortunately fainted, so I then switched over to my Drowsy. Drowsy's not particularly strong, but they have high special defense, so hopefully it can withstand at least a couple hits from this Voltorb. The strategy worked incredibly well, as my Drowsy took very little damage. Next up is his Pikachu. While Pikachus can have fairly decent special attack, their physical defense is terrible, so I switched to my newly acquired Geodude, mostly because Pikachu has no moves which do much damage to it, and this paid off beautifully, with a single rock throw being enough to knock it out. Last up is his Raichu, so I switched over to Ekans just to lower its attack stat by a little bit. I switched back to Geodude, and since the AI recognizes that electric-type moves don't do anything against ground-type Pokemon, it just kept using Quick Attack over and over again. We were both down into red health, but thankfully, despite Rock Throw being a fairly inaccurate move, I was able to hit, winning us our third gym badge. It's a good thing that move hit, otherwise there's a good possibility I could have lost that battle. The only thing I can do now in the game is to go through Rock Tunnel, but first you have to go through Route 10. There are actually some fairly tough trainers on this route, but thankfully you're only required to battle 2 of them. The first of which is a Picnicker, which is notoriously easy. Picnickers usually only use Grass-type Pokemon, which have a ton of weaknesses, plus they have just terrible AI, so they use moves like Sweet Scent over and over again. So even though I didn't have a whole lot of Pokemon available for these battles, I could just use a Rattata and knock them out. Next up is Rock Tunnel, which is usually just an inconvenience, but on this run it was horrible. Normally Pokemaniacs are just good for easy experience points, but in this run they're just way stronger than I am, and their AI is actually fairly decent, so they use some good moves against me. A few of these took a couple tries, but eventually I was able to make it out and made my way into Lavender Town. The Pokemon Tower rival battle is optional at this point, but I wanted to give it a try just to see where I would stack up. Now normally for this battle the only things you really have to worry about are his very powerful Kadabra and his Wartortle. But just like a lot of other battles I've had up until this point, some of the more unexpected Pokemon are actually very difficult to deal with. I could barely do any damage to his Execute, which is widely regarded as his worst Pokemon by far. And as I expected, his Kadabra was very powerful as well. The few times I ever got to it was an absolute brick wall. I could never beat this thing no matter what I did. So instead of retrying that battle for no reason, I decided to go over to Celadon City to go to their marketplace. Here I picked up one of the most important items you can get in the game, and that's Evolution Stones. I decided to evolve Pikachu into Raichu. While I obviously like Pikachu, it's just too weak for this point of the game. Here's my new and improved team. Blue now has 5 Pokemon that I have to deal with, so I can no longer just hope for good luck. I'm going to have to come in with a very solid strategy. As usual, he starts with his Pidgeotto, so I send out one of my Geodudes that I caught in that Geodude is part Rock-type, meaning that it's super effective against Flying-type Pokemon. Somehow my Rock Throws never missed despite all the sand attacks, and I was able to take it out with 11 health remaining. I sent out Raichu to deal with Wartortle. When it was just a Pikachu, it would get taken out in one shot from Water Gun or Bite or really any of its moves. Thankfully though now it's able to survive a couple hits, and it managed to paralyze Wartortle. Just like the rival battle on the SSN, I sent out Beedrill to use Attract. Now Wartortle is not only paralyzed but is also infatuated with Beedrill, so from there it's a very easy victory. Because of all the trouble I had with his Execute through all the rival battles, I decided to pick up a Pokemon that I rarely ever use. Meowth is surprisingly one of the only Pokemon at this level that can learn the move Bite, which is a Dark-type move, which is super effective against Psychic types, like Execute. Next up is his Kadabra. This thing is faster than all of my Pokemon, and can basically one-shot them all with Confusion. I got off an Encore for Disable, so that way I could switch over to Beedrill for Attract. Once again, Attract was working perfectly. I was able to poison it, as well as lowering its speed with String Shot. Unfortunately though, just before it was about to faint, it managed to get off a very powerful Confusion, which is super effective against Beedrill because it's part Poison type. Thankfully though, it was taken out on the next turn. But next up is his Growlithe, which is another Pokemon that really caused me some problems. It has a pretty high special attack stat, so that Ember can one-shot virtually everything I have. The only thing it can't one-shot is my Clefable. Honestly, I sort of regretted my decision when I first gave it its Moonstone, but now I'm realizing that was a great decision. Dig is doing passable damage, plus it can survive a few hits. Eventually though, it was taken out. I then sent out Meowth just hoping I could do any amount of damage, but it was taken out quickly too. Last up is Mr. Mime, but he got the job done, allowing us to advance to the next portion of the game. The only thing worth recapping in the Rocket Hideout was the Giovanni battle. His highest level Pokemon Kangaskhan is level 29, meaning I can only use level 14 Pokemon for this fight. I honestly wasn't too worried about it though. Usually these battles are really easy regardless of whatever Pokemon you use, and this was no exception. I opened up with Oddish because it's part Grass type, meaning it gets a stab bonus on the move Absorb, which has a 4 times effectiveness against Onix. Even though I was 11 levels lower than it, I was able to take out about a third of its health every attack. Next up is Rhyhorn, another Pokemon that has a 4 times weakness to Grass type moves. I used Poison Powder just to be safe, but surprisingly it took me out because of its powerful Stomp. But my second Oddish was just too much for it to overcome. A single Absorb plus poison damage was enough to win us this portion of the fight, without taking any damage ourselves. Next up is Kangaskhan, the only Pokemon that I was actually worried about in this battle. Just to be safe, I poisoned it so it would take damage every turn. It used a very powerful Bite, knocking me out. Bite is a Dark-type move, so it would have been able to one-shot both of my Psychic-type Pokemon. Clefable was the only one of my Pokemon that could have survived a few attacks. A few digs plus the poison damage was enough to win us the battle, and allowed us to get the Silph Scope so that we could see ghosts. This brings us to the most important Pokemon for this entire run. A Pokemon that I rarely even consider putting on my team, and that's Ghastly. What makes Ghastly so powerful is that at level 13 it can learn a typeless move known as Curse. Curse does different moves depending on what type you are, but for ghost types, it causes the other person's Pokemon to lose a quarter of its health every single turn. That's why for our upcoming battle against Erika, the Grass-type gym leader, I'm going to be bringing in 3 Ghastlys to deal with her Pokemon. She loves to use stalling moves, so Curse is going to be very crucial for winning this battle. I opened up with Mr. Mime just so I could use a Light Screen to boost my team's special defense. Then I switched for one of my male Ghastlys. Because Erika's team are all females, having a male Ghastly will allow me to use Attract. One of the first moves that Ghastly learns is Lick, a move that has a chance of paralyzing the target. Now that Victory Bell is paralyzed and slower than my Pokemon, I decided to use my most important move, Curse. While Curse does unfortunately take half my health, I think that is more than worth it because I'm able to take out a quarter of my opponent's health every single turn. Using Attract, Curse, and Paralyzation is a lethal combo that I'm going to be using for the rest of the run. The only thing that could make this even better is if I can learn Confuse Ray, which I get at level 21. To make this battle a little bit more interesting, I decided to switch from my Farfetch to deal with her Tangela. I taught it the move Fly, which is a 2-turn attack which has a base power of 90, and because of the special type attack bonus, that power is raised even higher than that. This battle took a little bit longer than it should have, mostly because it used the move Ingrain, which heals it up a little bit every turn. And instead of switching to Ghastly to deal with her Vileplume, I left out Farfetch'd because it knows the move Sand Attack, which lowers the opponent's accuracy by 1 stage. It kept missing its attacks until it finally got off a Sleep Powder, but I quickly recovered from that and then began using Fly. I'm doing about a quarter of its health and damage every single turn, so although this battle took a little while, there was no question that I was going to be able to win. Farfetch'd is just too powerful and it has too high of an attack stat. After the battle, I went back to the Pokemon Tower to pick up the Pokeflute. After awakening the Snorlaxes, I used the item finder to get the game's most valuable item, Leftovers. After finally getting to Fuchsia City, I made a beeline for the Safari Zone. There are a lot of rare Pokemon in here, but the most valuable one for me is Chansey. It can take a few hits due to its high health, and can stall the opposition long enough so that poison or whatever can take effect. After getting all the required items in the Safari Zone, my next big challenge is Koga, the Poison-type gym leader. His highest level Pokemon, Weezing, is level 43, meaning I have to start the battle with Pokemon level 21 or lower. As you could probably guess by now, I made sure to include a couple Ghastlys on my team, as well as including a few Pokemon who resist Poison-type attacks. As always, he starts with his first Koffing. It knows both Self-Destruct and Toxic, but since I'm using Ghastly, neither of those moves affect it. My strategy is fairly simple. I'm going to paralyze my opponents and then place a curse on them, and then switch for one of my other Pokemon to deal damage. Nidoking has a great attack stat, plus it can't be poisoned, so it took out Koffing very easily. I made sure to give the leftovers to my Ghastly, that way I can use Curse more than twice per Pokemon. Even though I heal up very slowly, I figured this would be a good strategy, especially in the later game. This Muck battle is always frustrating, mostly because he keeps using moves like Minimize, but thankfully Curse affects him every single move regardless. His second Koffing also knows the move Self-Destruct, so I sent out one of my Geodude just to absorb the attack. I wanted both Nidoking and Ghastly to have as much health as possible for the final Pokemon. I probably could have used a better strategy against this Coughing because it took out both my Geodudes, but thankfully I still had a big advantage going against his 4th Pokemon. I sent out Ghastly from the start, hoping to inflict a curse upon Wheezing. Nidoking was doing decent damage, but his special defense was just not high enough to deal with the Sludge. Last up though was Onix, and since he resists Sludge, it was a pretty easy victory. Instead of going over to Saffron City immediately, I made my way over to Cinnabar Island to pick up a very important Pokemon. It's here in this laboratory that you can revive the fossil Pokemon Aerodactyl. Normally I don't use Aerodactyl because it's part rock type, but since it's so fast, I think it's going to be very useful for this run. Alright, now it's time to start the battle that scared me from the very beginning of this game, the Silph rival battle. His Blastoise is level 40, meaning I can only come in with Pokemon level 20 or lower. Literally just about every Pokemon he has can one-shot my entire team, so I'm going to have to come up with a brilliant strategy just to be able to beat him. First up is his newly evolved Pidgeot. I sent out my Aerodactyl, which I taught the move Double Team that I acquired in the Safari Zone. Since my Aerodactyl is thankfully female, I'm able to use the move Attract against all of his Pokemon. And yes, I taught it the move Toxic, a Poison-type move that gets more effective every single turn. Not only can his Pidgeot barely hit me, it takes a ton of damage every single move. Now his Blastoise though is very scary. After using Toxic, I began using Rock Tomb just to hopefully lower its speed, that way my other Pokemon could outspeed it. The strategy worked as I was able to inflict a curse before my Ghastly fainted. My second Ghastly also fainted, but then on my third Ghastly I made sure to send it out, that way I could get the experience points to level it up to level 21, where it learns the move Confuse Ray. As you can see, I brought out another female Pokemon, Arcanine. This may have been unnecessary because Ember is super effective, but it's better to be safe than sorry. His Alakazam may honestly be his most scary Pokemon, but thankfully at this point in the game he only knows Future Sight, which has the potential of failing like it did here, and after that happened it was an incredibly easy victory. Growlithe isn't too scary yet because it hasn't been evolved, but I decided to use Attract because its takedown is fairly powerful, and I wanted to make sure it could use that as little as possible. This took several tries, but honestly wasn't as difficult as I expected. Immediately after that is another boss battle against Giovanni, so I left the Silph building to grab another team, and then came back and immediately challenged him. Once again, I'm not really worried about this battle. When I was a kid, I thought Giovanni was a very difficult boss, but after playing the game so many times, I realized he's very easy. I first sent out Ghastly to deal with his Nidorino by using a curse. A few poison stings were enough to cause Ghastly to faint. I switched to my other Ghastly, that way she could gain experience points from the battle and level up to level 21, which allows her to learn the move Confuse Ray. Rhyhorn has a 4x weakness to water moves, so even though Gyarados is 17 levels lower, a single Surf was enough to almost take it out. Once his Rhyhorn fainted, I then switched to Ghastly to deal with his Kangaskhan. Kangaskhan only knows normal type moves, which have no effect against ghost type Pokemon. I also technically can't hit it, but thankfully my curse took out a quarter of its health every turn, and Giovanni doesn't have any potions. Last up is Nidoqueen, but I just inflict a curse upon it immediately, and then start spamming Confuse Ray and Lick until it eventually faints. Very easy battle, beat it on the first try. Next up is the Saffron City gym leader, Sabrina. This was the one gym leader that really scared me from the beginning of this game. Since FireRed is just a remake of Gen 1, there are no Dark-type Pokemon in this game, meaning that all of her attacks can hit me. And since her Pokemon have such high special attack and are incredibly quick, they can one-shot everything I have. I am going to need a flawless strategy to be able to beat this gym. Thankfully her Kadabra has very low physical defense, so even though Geodude has a poor attack stat, one self-destruct was enough to take it out. Next up is her Mr. Mime, so I decided to use Aerodactyl, that way I can lower its speed with Rock Tomb. I brought in a level 7 Geodude just to absorb her Future Sight attack. I brought out a male Ghastly because all of her Pokemon are female, that way I could use the move Attract. I attempted this battle multiple times, and I learned that this is the only strategy that I can use to beat this Mr. Mime. Its special attack and special defense are just way too high for my Pokemon to deal with. This portion of the battle took an incredibly long time, but thankfully because of the combination of Attract, Confuse Ray, and Paralysis, Mr. Mime just wasn't able to hit me, and my curse slowly whittled it down. Next up is her terrifying Alakazam. But I had absolutely incredible luck. Instead of using Psychic, she decided to use Future Sight over and over again, which kept failing, so her most powerful Pokemon lost to a single Ghastly. Last up is her Venomoth. Ghastly managed to get off a Confuse Ray, but was taken out by Future Sight attack on the next turn. My last Pokemon is Geodude. Because of incredible confusion luck, plus Rock Throw being super effective, I was able to win, getting us our 6th gym badge. I attempted this battle 37 times. Honestly, the only reason I won was because of amazing luck. I'm going to have to come up with a better strategy for future battles. After healing up, I flew back to Cinnabar Island to attempt the 7th gym. Normally Fire-type Pokemon are pretty easy to beat because of all the weaknesses that they have, but the Pokemon that ruined almost every one of my runs was his very powerful Arcanine. It's level 47, so a single bite or Fire Blast can one-shot everything that I have. Just like all my other attempts, I opened with Gyarados to deal with his Growlithe. Even though it's 19 levels higher than I am, 2 Surfs were enough to cause it to faint. Next up is Ponyta. Thankfully it missed his first Fire Blast, but the second one was powerful enough to take out my Nidoking in one hit. I sent out Aerodactyl because it's part Rock type, so it resists Fire type moves. I started building up Double Teams, just praying that Fire Blast would miss because of its low accuracy. Then I used Attract because all of Blaine's Pokemon are male. Ponyta kept being immobilized by Love, so just a few Rock Tombs was enough to knock it out. But then, instead of switching for Rapidash like he normally does, he immediately sent out his Arcanine. Although its Intimidate ability did lower my attack, I knew that Aerodactyl was going to be the only one of my Pokemon that stood a chance against this thing. My strategy at first was to poison it, but I had to switch over to Rock Tomb because Blaine kept using full heals. I was actually doing pretty good damage because of Aerodactyl's high attack stat. Blaine just kept spamming Fire Blast, but I'd built up a lot of Double Teams by this point, so it kept missing. Unfortunately though, Blaine is one of the most frustrating gym leaders in this entire game. He used one of his Hyper Potions when Arcanine got into red health, healing it up completely. I was running low on Rock Tomb, so I decided to switch back to the Toxic method. Since he's now taking poison damage every turn, I no longer needed to attack, so I was just praying that he'd either miss or he'd be immobilized by Love. This portion of the battle took several minutes to complete, but eventually, after many failed attempts, I was able to knock out his Arcanine finally. But my luck ran out against his Rapidash. Not only was he able to hit me with his first Fire Blast, his second connected as well. Thankfully though, his third missed against my Ghastly. I inflicted a curse upon it, so now it takes a quarter of its health and damage every single turn. My Arcanine can't take fire damage, so that, coupled with curse, was enough to get us our 7th gym badge. There's nothing else to do at this point in the game except for going back to Viridian City to attempt the final Giovanni battle. Based on our first 2 Giovanni fights, I wasn't at all worried about it. The thing that actually surprised me is how difficult some of his trainers are. Most of them have 5 Pokemon, and they can be very strong. Thankfully though, I was able to make it through the 2 required trainers. Giovanni's highest level Pokemon is a level 50 Rhyhorn. The only thing I'm actually worried about in this battle is unintentionally over-leveling my Pokemon. If any of them get up to level 27, I won't be able to use them in the upcoming Rifle battle. So as you can see, some of my Pokemon are actually under-leveled for this point. Gyarados was able to one-shot both of his Rhyhorns, surprisingly. Dugtrio is fast, but is incredibly weak. Since Gyarados is now up to level 25, I decided to switch over to one of my Ghastlys. Nidoqueen really doesn't have any moves that can hurt me. The only move it knows that does any damage to Ghastly is Poison Sting, which is double resisted. After only 4 turns, his Nidoqueen fainted. Last up is Nidoking. I decided to send out my Lapras that I acquired in Silph. I really did not want to overlevel this thing, so I decided to use Perish Song, a move that makes both Pokemon faint after 3 turns. I sent out Ghastly to use Confuse Ray, and from there the battle was over. Giovanni's team is just too weak. Before we can attempt the Elite Four, we have one more rival battle. During the Caterpie Weedle run, this battle took me over 100 tries, so I really thought this was going to be difficult, but I was completely wrong. I sent out Aerodactyl because it resists flying type moves, and I was able to build up a few Double Teams. I then used Attract to immobilize his Pidgeot. Rock Tomb is super effective against flying type Pokemon, plus it lowers their speed, allowing me to attack first. I then used Toxic against it, so that, along with Rock Tomb, are doing massive damage every turn. And instead of just taking it out with a single Rock Tomb, I decided to stall a little bit, that way I could build up more Double Teams. Next up is Blastoise. His second Water Gun managed to hit, but not before I was able to badly poison it. My second Pokemon that I brought out is my Chansey that I caught in the Safari Zone. Remember how I said Chansey would be an excellent stall Pokemon? This is why. I can't be one-shot by any of his Pokemon, plus I can heal up every turn with Soft Boiled. Blue then for some reason sent out his Rhyhorn, but just like the last gym battle, Rhyhorn was one-shot with a single Surf. I was honestly a little bit surprised by his Growlithe. It did more damage with Takedown than I thought. Gyarados fainted after 2 attacks. But thankfully Lapras also knows Surf, so a single attack was enough to knock Growlithe out. Now I know exactly what you guys are thinking. You're probably wondering why I'm using a Haunter and a Graveler, rather than their evolved counterparts. Well, like I said at the beginning of the challenge, I don't use glitches or cheats. And well, unfortunately I don't really have any friends, so I have nobody to trade with. So yeah, I'm gonna have to go into this battle as well as the Elite Four with under-evolved Pokemon. As you can see, this battle was weirdly easy. I beat it on the first try. Victory Road was kinda weird. There aren't any required trainer battles in here, so I could just skip through all that. But what I can't skip are wild Pokemon encounters, even with a Repel, so I just have to hope that I'm able to run away. It only took me about 15 minutes to get out of Victory Road, but the entire time I was thinking, what is going to be my strategy for the Elite Four? Lorelei is an Ice-type trainer, and her Pokemon are absolute beasts. They have really high health, plus they're the fully evolved version of their Pokemon, so I can barely withstand a single hit from any of them. I kept retrying the battle, just hoping for good luck, but I needed to come in with a better strategy. Here's the team I'm going to be using for the entirety of the Elite Four. I could come into this battle at level 27, but I decided to do 26, that way I don't overlevel for the next Elite Four member. First up is Lapras versus Dugong. I confused and paralyzed it before switching for my next Pokemon. Haunter was able to curse Dugong before being switched out. Lapras is honestly the only Pokemon that I have that can take more than one hit from any one of her team. Plus, since it's part Ice-type, it doesn't take hail damage every turn. This was the only attempt where Dugong wasn't able to take out a single one of my Pokemon. Her Cloyster is so frustrating though. It used spikes, so I can't switch between my Pokemon without taking damage. But then I remembered, my Haunters can't take spike damage because of their ability Levitate. I knew that my only attacking move, Lick, would do almost nothing to this Cloyster, so I just kept stalling until Curse was finally able to knock it out. Because Haunter is a Ghost-type Pokemon, the game's AI had her send out Slowbro, which is part Psychic-type. I basically used the same strategy as I did against Dugong. Lapras confused and paralyzed it, and then I sent out Haunter to inflict another curse. I used Surf against it just to preserve PP for my other moves. Next up is her Jinx, a Pokemon that I rarely even think about, but was the main reason why I had to attempt this battle so many times. As you can see, it basically one-shot my entire team. Luckily though, my Gyarados does know Bite, which is a Dark-type move that's super effective against Jinx. Then her Lapras did one of the stupidest things it could. It used Surf against my Lapras, so instead of taking damage, I actually healed up a little bit, and I used one of my 5 Perish Songs against it. From there, I just tried to stall it until the end of the game. I have one more Pokemon left after this, so if my Lapras can hold on, I'm going to win the battle. Lapras did faint, but thankfully its counterpart was on its final move of its Perish Song, so we did beat Lorelei, but next up is Bruno. He's the Fighting-type Elite Four member, but for some reason he has a pair of Onixes that he uses. Because of its 4 times weakness to water moves, a single Surf was almost enough to one-shot it. Gyarados didn't take much damage before I was able to knock it out. His Fighting-type Pokemon, though, are the scary ones. Aerodactyl was one-shot by Sky Uppercut, but thankfully his Hitmonchan only knows one move that can hit Ghost-type Pokemon, and that's Rock Tomb. He then sent out a second Onix, so I switched back to Gyarados. It did great damage before Lapras came in and finished the job. I forgot that some of his Pokemon know the move Foresight, which allows fighting types to hit Ghosts, but they can only hit Pokemon that they use that move against. So my strategy was just to keep switching between my 2 Haunters, that way I could never hit either of them. This strategy worked perfectly, so neither of my Haunters took any damage. Last up is his very powerful Machamp. Its signature move is Cross Chop, a very powerful move, but thankfully it's fairly inaccurate. It one-shot all of my Pokemon, and easily could have one-shot Lapras as well. But it missed and Curse caused it to faint. Third Elite Four member is Agatha. I can't even tell you how many attempts this battle took. Her Pokemon hit hard, and my team doesn't have the best special defense. I started off with Aerodactyl because it's the only one of my Pokemon who can outspeed hers. I was able to get a few Rock Tombs off to lower Gengar's speed before eventually being taken out. From here, I just need a really good strategy and incredible luck. The combination of Paralysis, Confusion, and Curse have proved to be absolutely crucial throughout this run. Unfortunately though, I'm at a disadvantage because she's able to use full restores. At the beginning of this challenge, I said that I wasn't allowed to use any items like potions. These probably could have saved me hours of attempts, but I simply refused to use them for this run. I think it just makes things way too easy and it defeats the entire purpose of the game, which is to develop a strategy, like what you're witnessing right now, to be able to outmaneuver your opponents, rather than just simply spamming hyper potions until you win. Her Haunter is one of the most frustrating Pokemon in this entire game, but thankfully its AI is kinda weird, so I was able to beat it on the first attempt where I was able to make it to it. Her second Gengar, though, is by far her most powerful Pokemon. I switched my Gyarados in and out to use its Intimidate ability to lower its attack. Gengar's Sludge Bomb is one of the most powerful moves in the game, so I had to lower its attack, otherwise I was going to lose. This proved to be a good decision, as I was able to withstand a few hits, winning us the battle. The final Elite Four member is Lance, the Dragon-type trainer. I opened up with Lapras once again, that way I could use Confuse Ray as well as Body Slam. He tried to use Hyper Beam, but since I switched to my Haunter, it did no damage. My first Haunter went down pretty quickly because of Bite, but I then switched to my Aerodactyl to use Double Team. I had incredible luck and Gyarados kept missing its attack, so I just kept on building double teams until his Gyarados eventually fainted. His Aerodactyl is scary, so I decided to open up with Toxic to poison it. I then immediately used Attract. This ended up being an amazing decision because Aerodactyl was not able to attack the entire battle. I was feeling pretty confident until he sent out one of his Dragonairs. I did almost no damage with Rock Tomb, so that's when I got nervous. I had to go back to the strategy of just using Curse and Confuse Ray and hoping for the best. This worked for the first Dragonair, but I honestly didn't think it was going to work for the second. It has the Shed Skin ability, meaning it can heal its own paralysis without the use of a full restore, but thankfully the luck was on my side. Turn after turn, I was waiting for it to use the ability, but it never did. Last up though is his Dragonite, so I used my Gyarados to cut its attack. It took out 2 of my Pokemon ridiculously quickly, but thankfully it confused itself from Outrage. I was very lucky as it kept hitting itself in confusion, plus I got the Paralysis and Perish Song off. Lapras fainted, but the Perish Song ended with only 1 Pokemon left on the field, being my Graveler. Here we are at the last battle of the game against our rival Blue. All of his Pokemon are fully evolved, so I'm going to have to be at my very best to win this battle. By now you could probably guess my strategy. Open with Lapras and then switch to Haunter. All of Blue's Pokemon are male, so I'm going to be able to use Attract on them. He does have full restores now that he's the champion, and that's the part that makes me really nervous. Just getting by Pidgeot took me several attempts, so I know this battle is going to be hard. Eventually though, Curse took it out and then he sent out his Alakazam. It knows the move Psychic now in addition to knowing Future Sight. I'm not really sure why, but for some reason Future Sight failed, and this allowed Haunter to hold on for a few more turns before eventually being taken out. Alakazam fainted, and because I sent out Aerodactyl, the AI decided to send out his Blastoise. Honestly though, this was the only one of his Pokemon that I didn't struggle with. Throughout all the failed attempts during this battle, I never actually lost more than one Pokemon to his Blastoise. Like on this attempt, he for some reason used the move Hydro Pump, which instead of doing damage actually healed my Lapras. This portion of the battle took a while, but I never was in any real danger. I've never understood why the game lets Blue have a Rhydon. It has a ton of weaknesses, plus I really don't think it's strong enough to be used by someone who is the champion of the Pokemon League. A single Surf plus Curse was enough to make it faint. Next up is Arcanine, a Pokemon I hardly ever even think about when I do this blue battle. But it was the one Pokemon that made this battle take forever. Even though I have a number of Pokemon with type advantage over Arcanine, this thing is just way too strong because of its Fire Blast. It can one-shot literally everything I have, including my Aerodactyl. So I just had to rely on it missing and hoping that my attacks would hit. What you're watching is about 7 minutes of footage being sped up incredibly quickly. Blue just kept spamming Full Restore, meaning my Toxic had to reset every single time. Finally, after dozens of attempts, I finally got past the Arcanine. Last up is Exeggutor. Thankfully all of his Giga Drains missed, and Blue must have used up all of his Full Restores, so we won the challenge. I gotta say, there were a lot of moments during this run that I honestly didn't think it would be possible. This challenge was really unique. It was unlike anything I've ever tried before. I ended up using Pokemon that I rarely ever think about using during normal playthroughs. And then I ended up using certain Pokemons in ways that I never would have even considered in the past. Normally Aerodactyl is just used as a sweeper Pokemon, to quickly take out the other person's team. But for this run, I used it mostly as a stall Pokemon, to use moves like Double Team and Toxic. What was even more surprising were some of the Pokemon that I struggled with. Like in Rock Tunnel, I had more trouble with Pokemaniacs than I did with a lot of the gym leaders, and this was so much different than the Caterpie Weedle run. In that game, I had to overlevel just to be able to compete with the opponent's Pokemon. But this game was entirely based on strategy. If you guys want to check out my other video, I have it linked here. Let me know in the comments what teams you guys would have used. If you liked this video, it'd mean the world to me if you gave it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel.